Right.
I am so excited to be able to share a little bit of information with you by way of one of our student partners. Megan is here with us and going to talk us through, tell us a little bit about themselves and their work at the university level, and share a little bit about this fitting research that was done in collaboration with the Women's Fund. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan.
Uh, um, so I'm a student with uh, UTC in the Women, Gender, and Sexuality department, but I also have um, worked in data science and everything. So I wanted to tackle an issue that I knew I could find data on, and we could process that uh, well. And that was the economic issue of the wage gap. And most importantly, I thought that the biggest issue that we could address to help work on that in Chattanooga specifically was subsidizing childcare. So first, I have an introduction to the gender wage gap. So in 2020, Tennessee women made approximately 81.8% the income of men in Tennessee. And this was broken down, not specifically for the state, but in an overall study to determine the causes. And you'll notice here that industry, which is the general field that women tend to go into, and occupation, which is the specific jobs within those fields that women tend toward, explain a combined about 50% of the wage gap. So an entire half of the wage gap is chalked up to the jobs that women do. So I wanted to look into this occupational sorting and find out what plays the roles in that, and how we can address them. So I first started by graphing the Bureau of Labor Statistic data for average wage or median wage in Chattanooga annually by occupational category against similar data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the percentage of people in those occupational categories who are women. So as you can see, there is a downward trend in median income as the concentration of women increases. And to get an idea as to where this is coming from, I sorted the data and just took a highlight of who was making the least and the most. And if you look at the lowest median, the 5 lowest median incomes, you'll find they're all service positions. They're all female majority. And if you look at the 5 highest median, only one of them is female majority. And that's pharmacist, which again is more public facing and service related than some of the other positions in that list. So I wanted to look at the influence of gender roles on career choice. The biggest thing that I was finding was that it comes down to different time responsibilities balanced between work and home, because it is known that women spend greater average time on domestic labor than their male partners. So this can cause more difficulty balancing work with their childcare commitments when women are more likely to experience those career interruptions. Let's see, and this also affects groups that are already most economically disadvantaged, as do any issue of this type. So it highlights the issues. And then, so the the problem with this is it's easy enough to say they just need to get more. They just need to put their children in childcare. It's easy enough to say that, and then they would be able to focus on work there. But however, this is unreasonable price-wise. I saw news articles specifically out of Chattanooga where people were saying that childcare was approaching the cost of rent. It was costing more than, on average, than college education for early childcare. And I mean, if you look at this is only for if you look at the middle graph, that's only for a low income family of 3. So that's one child and 2 parents. But not every family only has one child. So that just adds to the cost. So my proposal, if you look at this graph here, the United States is actually an outlier on how little they spend per toddler on childcare compared to other nations. So I believe it is in the capacity to put more money towards childcare. And when you look at these numbers, when you look at the top nations on this graph and then compare that to the countries with the highest or with the lowest gender gap, there's a lot of overlap there. So I think that if we invested more and put more towards childcare, that would not only supply more economic freedom to women to pursue different types of positions, but also if we consider it an investment into the future of the economy in general, there are more conservative estimates that suggest $3 or $4, whereas there are certain programs that boast as much as $12 of return per $1 invested in quality early childcare. This includes gains in education, benefits towards socialization and social skills, nutrition, as there is a more, they could be having more professional eyes on the child. And in conclusion, I think that should the local, state, or federal government treat childcare, early childcare, and after school ongoing childcare as an investment, both toward women and towards the children themselves, then that would not only benefit women directly, though I do acknowledge not every woman is going to be a mother at any point. There also have been studies showing that one of the largest things keeping women out of very high-paying male-dominated fields is the perception of exclusivity and the discrimination and harassment in those workplaces that are more present in firms that are more male-dominated. Whereas that goes down, the more women are present. So getting any women into these male-dominated exclusive fields can help make gains in visibility and accessibility towards all women. So that is all.
Megan, thank you so much for walking us through that. I just have a few follow-up questions. When we think about the impact of visibility, maybe talk to me about what were some of either the implications that you saw in the research or even just what you have observed from your experience. You came to us with a very specific interest in the wage gap. You and I had a great conversation, and sort of this has been a interest of yours even prior to this semester's work. So what, if we had to identify beyond just the numbers, what's the problem?
Well, in uh, Tennessee, well, in the United States as a whole, when you look at the numbers, the majority of people in poverty are women, and the most likely household to be in poverty is single mothers, and um, the effects of economic dependence of in heterosexual relationships of a woman making less than her partner um, can be seen in coercion and abuse economically as well, or financially rather. Um, so there are um, societal implications of women making less than men um, from this wage gap.
Yeah. What, in what ways do you see this particular policy recommendation, which was very thoughtful and presented in a light that I find very convincing? What are some of the, again, beyond the numbers, what are some of the cultural implications, communal implications that you would project as a product of this particular policy shift?
Um, well, I would like to think that potentially by taking the no longer having motherhood be like these this let me think through that for a second. Having it no longer become like a specific point in someone's career, like they look at this and like, this is the point that I became a mother, and that was the only had to, I you know begin experience workplace interruptions or what have you, and was no longer able to take the hours or positions they were before. That after some time, and where culturally we get used to that no longer being like something that needs to be worked around as significantly, then potentially it could um, help later generations of women get used to like the idea of um, you know caring and motherhood. It's not my only role. I can do that and take on more things. It's not going to be like the that's not going to be my only role at some point in life. Like it's um and also like taking on a higher paying job is not going to be a burden that prevents them from being able to be mothers either. So the idea that it can be balanced means that like the woman in the workplace and the mother at home can be the same person, but like she doesn't have to think of herself as that. It's not the same person, metaphorically. So I think that you know de-emphasizing that caring and domestic labor is the woman's sole or majority role could help uh, shift that focus and help get reach um, better equality with the gendered expectations of roles in society in general, I hope.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think my last question to you, what could an organization like the Women's Fund anticipate as far as pushback to this particular policy recommendation? And what's the counter argument?
Um, well, there would be people who would have issue with providing taxpayer funds towards services that they do not feel, in their words, that people are earning themselves. There are also are technically programs out there to assist people with childcare, but currently that is in the form of uh, tax rebates, which is not going to reach as many people as it needs to because the money gets there come time for the tax refund, not in time for enrollment and tuition payments. Or there are some firms, such as just recently, I saw Dollywood is offering um, uh, subsidized childcare or putting towards childcare for their workers. However, that still keep that still removes the freedom of making career decisions from the women, which is entirely the point of this project, is allowing women to not have to base their career decisions on whether or not they can find childcare. Um, and also, I don't want it to be reliant on them working yet because uh, I know that especially when the economy is where it's at, the that trying to find employment, especially in some fields, can be its own full-time job, attending interviews, sending out resumes and everything. So even not currently employed or underemployed women or would need to be able to get childcare. Um, there are families that wouldn't be able to afford it under the current system, especially because there are strict cutoffs as far as income to where they might or people might be making enough not to qualify, but not enough to where it seems like a viable option. Um, and so despite the fact that um, there are technically programs to help offset the costs, I do think that there are a lot of people who would find issue with putting more money towards this sort of thing. um, and yes,
Yeah,
and
great.
that reminds me, oh sorry,
No, go ahead.
and that reminds me of another point I had slipped my mind for the societal implications. There are also there's been extensive research showing that there are women and families who've determined uh, that the cost of childcare is more than one of the two partners makes, and since the wage gap means that women tend to be the lowest earning partner, there are women who aren't even included in the wage gap because they aren't or aren't included in unemployment data or anything because they have completely had to drop out of the workforce because it is more affordable to be a stay-at-home mother than it is to send her children to daycare. So that's restricting economic freedom and mobility even further.
Yeah, great point. I know, oftentimes we overlook some of the difficult decisions that families make based on childcare. A lot of times the conversation is very um, either, sort of black and white. Either you have the funds and are able to think about school or care choices for your child, or you just don't. And there is this negotiation that happens for families oftentimes. And I think your diving into this topic especially gives us a different perspective to consider and think about not only the wage gap, which we know will absolutely require a collaborative effort to shift. It is a marathon, not a sprint in that regard. But just like our journey together, your work as a service learning student supporting the work of the Women's Fund, knowing that there are micro ways in which we can continue to have an impact, and we can consider, while we're trying to uproot the tree itself, how do we make the fruit a little healthier? How do we cultivate the right environment where we're, as an ecosystem, we are able to align in a way that serves us a little bit better. And I think your policy recommendations absolutely hits on one of those strategies. So thank you so much, Megan, for your time, for your interest, and definitely for lending your talent in service of the Women's Fund to allow us an opportunity to see an issue through the lens and perspective of a different individual, and also to bring to light potentially what is possible for us in a community. So I look forward to being able to continue to engage around this topic, and invite other folks into this conversation, which I think that was the point in us talking through, and we getting a chance to hear in your voice this information. So we're hoping it will serve as a catalyst for others to recognize the power of their voice and the potential that is there for us as a community. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for all your support and feedback throughout this project.
Absolutely.